To the young woman in the sharp blue suit stepping out of the town car, the floor of the old Liberty steel mill was just concrete, dirty, cracked, a liability waiting to be bulldozed. But to Frank, it was holy ground. He pushed the mop in a slow, rhythmic arc. Swish, swish. Frank was 82 years old. His back had a permanent curve to it, shaped by 6 decades of bending over machines, trenches, and now, this bucket. He wore a gray jumpsuit that had seen better days with the name Frank stitched in red thread over the pocket. The stitching was fraying, just like the building. In his left pocket, pressing cold and heavy against his thigh, was a large iron key. The woman's heels clicked against the concrete like gunshots. Clack, clack, clack. She was on her phone, pacing furiously, her voice echoing with that specific kind of stress that only comes from people who move money instead of steel. We are liquidating the asset. Liquidating the asset. Frank stopped mopping. He watched her heel leave a muddy streak through the soapy water. He didn't sigh. He didn't shake his head. He just dipped the mop back into the bucket, wrung it out with hands that looked like twisted oak roots, and started cleaning her mess again. She stopped 10 feet away, finally noticing him. Not as a person, but as an obstacle. She pulled the phone away from her ear, covering the microphone. Her eyes scanned him up and down. The stained boots, the gray stubble, the way he leaned on the mop handle to take the weight off his bad hip. "Excuse me," she said. Her tone wasn't mean. It was worse. It was indifferent. It was the voice of someone ordering a coffee. "Can you do that somewhere else? The noise is distracting. I'm on a call with New York." Frank looked up. His eyes were a pale, washed-out blue, but clear, sharp. "Dirt doesn't move itself, ma'am," Frank said. His voice was gravel, low and steady. "I don't know who the agency sent over, but you're supposed to be prepping the lobby for the final walkthrough tomorrow. The investors want to see the potential of the lot, not the filth of the past." She waved her hand around the room, dismissing the steel girders that had built the tanks for the Second World War. Dismissing the floor where 3 generations of men had fed their families. To her it was just rust. "It's not filth," Frank said softly. He squeezed the mop handle. "It's history." She laughed, a short, dry sound. "History doesn't pay the property taxes," she said, turning back to her phone call. "Mark?" "Yeah, I'm still here. No, just dealing with some incompetence on site. Listen, if the old man, the owner, the elusive Mr. Miller, if he doesn't show up to sign the deed transfer tomorrow, we trigger the hostile clause." "Yeah. I'm done playing nice." Frank went still. Mr. Miller. She was talking about him, but she didn't know it. Nobody had seen Mr. Miller in 20 years. The company was run by a board of trustees now, faceless suits and glass towers who handled the dividends while Frank handled the mop. He had stepped down, faded into the background, choosing to spend his twilight years tending to the building he loved rather than sitting in boardrooms listening to people talk about efficiency. He preferred the silence. He preferred the work. It kept the memories at bay. But this woman, Elena, that was her name on the security badge dangling from her neck. Elena Vance, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions. She was trying to erase it all. Frank slowly pushed the bucket forward, the wheels squeaking. The sound cut through her conversation again. She spun around, her face flushed with genuine irritation now. The stress of the deal, the pressure of the deadline, it was all boiling over, and Frank was the easiest target in the room. "Hey," she snapped, snapping her fingers. "Are you deaf?" I said stop. Frank stopped. He looked at her. "I have a job to do," he said. "Your job." She walked closer, invading his space, the smell of expensive perfume clashing with the smell of bleach and old iron. "Is whatever I say it is. I am the ranking officer on this site until the demolition crew arrives. And right now, you are in my way." She gestured to a pile of cardboard boxes in the corner. Files, old blueprints, debris from the office clean-out upstairs. "If you want to be useful," she said, pointing a manicured finger. "Take that trash to the dumpster out back, all of it. I want this floor clear." Frank looked at the boxes. The top one was open. He could see the edge of a framed photograph poking out, black and white. A group of men standing in front of a blast furnace covered in soot, smiling with their arms around each other. It wasn't trash. It was the class of 1952. "That's not trash," Frank said. The air in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. "Those are records, personnel files, memorabilia." "It is garbage," Elena said, her voice rising. She was losing control. The deal was shaky, her job was on the line, and this janitor was arguing semantics. "It's old paper in a dead building. Now move it or I call your agency and have you replaced by someone who can actually lift a box without needing a break every 5 minutes." She turned her back on him again, lifting the phone. "Mark, send the email. Tell Miller's lawyers that if he doesn't present himself at 9 a.m. sharp, we're filing the negligence suit." Frank felt the iron key heavy in his pocket. He looked at the boxes. He looked at the floor he had kept clean for 40 years. He looked at the woman who saw him as nothing more than a piece of furniture that had outlived its warranty. But Frank didn't work that way. He didn't fight for glory. He fought for ground. He moved toward the boxes. He moved slowly, his bad leg dragging slightly on the concrete. "Fine," Frank whispered. "I'll move them." Elena didn't even say thank you. She just kept talking, pacing, listing off the things she was going to destroy. Frank reached the first box. He reached down, his joints popping, and picked up the framed photo of the men from 1952. He wiped a smudge of dust off the glass with his thumb. He looked at the faces. Young men, strong men. Most of them gone now. He carefully placed the photo in his deep pocket, right next to the iron key. Then he picked up the box. It was heavy. He grunted softly, the weight pulling on his shoulders. Elena was pacing again. Frank was in the corner. He was emptying the wastebasket. He moved slowly, the plastic bag crinkling. A sharp, annoying sound in the tense silence. He had changed into a fresh gray jumpsuit, but it was still a jumpsuit. The name Frank was still stitched over his heart. "This is ridiculous," Elena muttered, checking her phone for the 10th time. "He's not coming, I knew it. The old man is senile. He probably forgot what day it is." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "If Mr. Miller isn't here by 9 sharp to contest the liquidation, the power of attorney defaults to the board. We can sign the demolition order at 9:01. Elena stopped pacing. She looked at the digital clock on the wall. The red numbers changed. 8:58. 2 minutes, she said. She turned to Frank. "Hey, you." Frank tied a knot in the trash bag. He didn't look up. "Leave the bag," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just get out. We need the room for a private vote. Go wait in the hall." Frank stood up. He adjusted his cap. He looked at the men around the table. He looked at the demolition foreman who wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'll stay," Frank said. The room went quiet. The lawyer took off his glasses. Elena looked like she had been slapped. "Excuse me?" She laughed, a high, incredulous sound. "You'll stay? This is a closed legal proceeding. You are the janitor. You empty the trash. You don't sit in on board meetings." "Actually," Frank said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the gravel of the subservient worker and finding the steel of a commander. "I think I do." He walked toward the head of the table. He didn't walk with a limp this time. He walked with the heavy, deliberate gait of a man inspecting his troops. Elena stepped in front of him. "Security is 1 button away, old man. Don't make me embarrass you." Frank stopped. He was close enough to see the fear behind her anger. She was terrified of losing this deal. She was terrified of failure. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out the key. The jagged black iron key he had carried since 1952. The key that opened the heavy steel gates of the foundry downstairs. The key that every man in that plant used to salute. He stepped around Elena. He walked to the empty leather chair at the head of the table. He didn't sit down. He placed the key on the polished mahogany. Thud. The sound was heavy, final. It echoed in the silence like a judge's gavel. "My name," Frank said, looking at the lawyer, "is Franklin James Miller, and I believe you're sitting in my chair." The silence in the room wasn't just quiet anymore. It was vacuum-sealed. Elena froze. Her face went pale, then red. She looked at the key. She looked at the jumpsuit. She looked at the man she had treated like furniture for 3 days. "That's impossible," she whispered. "You're the janitor." "I am," Frank said. "I've been the janitor for 10 years, because it's the only way to know what's really going on in my company." He reached into his other pocket. He pulled out the black and white photograph, the one she had told him to throw in the dumpster. The one of the men covered in soot, arms around each other, smiling in front of the blast furnace. He slid the photo across the table. It spun and stopped right in front of Elena. "You called this building a carcass," Frank said softly. "You called these records garbage." He pointed a calloused finger at the young man in the center of the photo, a boy with bright eyes and a smudge of grease on his cheek. He looked at the lawyer. "And the man next to me? That's your father, David. He broke his back on this floor in '64 so you could go to law school." The lawyer went white. He looked down at the table. Frank turned back to Elena. "You look at this factory and you see rust," Frank said, his voice trembling with a controlled rage that filled the room. "You see a line item on a spreadsheet. You see a bonus." He leaned in, placing both hands on the table. The hands of a worker. "But I see the blood in the concrete, Elena. I see the families we fed. I see the tanks we built that stopped tyranny in Europe. This isn't a property. It's a monument." He picked up the iron key again. He weighed it in his hand. "This key," he said, holding it up, "opens the front gate. It opens the past. And right now, it closes your deal." He tossed the key to the lawyer. "The demolition is canceled," Frank said. "We're not selling to the developers. We're retooling. We're turning the floor into a trade school. We're going to teach the next generation how to build things with their hands again, how to sweat." He looked at Elena. She was shrinking. All the sharp edges of her suit seemed to soften into defeat. "And as for you," Frank said. Elena braced herself. She closed her eyes, waiting for the words, "You're fired." "You're not fired," Frank said. She opened her eyes. "You're just blind," Frank said. "And I can't have blind people leading my company." He pointed to the door. "You're going to spend the next 6 months in the maintenance department. You're going to wear a jumpsuit. You're going to learn every inch of this building. You're going to learn the names of the people who clean your office." He paused, letting the sentence hang in the air. Frank picked up his trash bag. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked to the door. He stopped, looking back at the room full of stunned men in expensive suits. "Meeting adjourned," he said. He walked out into the hallway, the sound of his work boots heavy on the floor. Clomp, clomp. He didn't look back. He had a floor to mop. But Frank knew the truth. He knew that the only thing that matters is what you leave behind when the work is done. If you believe that respect is earned by the dirt on your hands and not the price of your suit, subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments below, who is the Frank in your life that nobody notices, but who holds the whole world together? I'll see you in the next one.